Good afternoon and welcome to our presentation for Health and Medicine. Today we will be joined by Dr. Renee Ross, Dr. Stephen Tristane, Dr. Bailey Dunn, and they will talk us through our Bachelor of Medicine. And what we're going to do now is introduce you to Dr. Bailey Dunn, who is a practicing doctor. Bailey, over to you.
Thanks very much. So I'm Bailey, and thanks for the introduction. I'm happy to chat with you about our MBBS program from an international perspective. So like Kyle mentioned, I work as a family doctor or GP part of the week, and I manage the global programs part of the MBBS program for the rest of the week. So I'm happy to speak to things like career outcomes and an international perspective within the medical program. So we'll get started. First, the acknowledgement of country, which we find quite important for anything that happens within Australia. So we want to pay our respects to our elders past and present and recognise the history of the land which we share at the university. There's a little bit about everybody who's presenting today. And we'll start with a little video.
If the video's not going to work, Bailey, we'll skip that slide then.
Perfect. So throughout the presentation, you'll see some really nice photographs of our 3 campuses. So the medical program is spread across 3 campuses. Students begin in Hobart years 3 through 5. In year 3, they decide where they want to spend the rest of the curriculum, years 4 and 5, and that can be at our Launceston Clinical School or our Rural Clinical School in Burnie, or they can stay in Hobart. So the MBBS program is a 5-year undergraduate degree. It's not limited to undergraduate students only, so we do accept students who are both in their final year of high school, as well as students who are currently enrolled in an undergraduate bachelor degree. We've had a few students come to us who have maybe started a Bachelor of Engineering, for example, and decide that they actually want to do medicine. And sometimes they see the term undergraduate course and they think that they're perhaps excluded from applying, and that's not the case at all. So you can be a high school graduate, you can be a current Bachelor of Arts or Science student, or you may have already completed and you're applying as a postgrad student. In every one of those cases, it's a 5-year degree. So like I said before, years 1 through 3 will be campus-based here in Hobart, and years 4 and 5 are clinical rotations, including some international, some international places that students have the option to do as an elective. I'm disappointed about the videos because they're really great. It looked like it was going to work. Perhaps not. So that's a little bit about the MBBS program. And I know there will be some running questions. I can't actually see what questions are happening because I'm sharing my screen, but please just sing out at the end if you've got questions regarding the MBBS program. And I think this is where I hand off to Renee, is that right?
Stephen.
Stephen.
Yes.
It's all yours.
Okay, thanks. Hello, everybody. I'm Steve Tristram. I run the laboratory medicine course at the university. So in the College of Health and Medicine, we have a number of degrees. Bailey's just talked to you about the MBBS. We also offer pharmacy and Bachelor of Medical Research, and I look after what's called laboratory medicine, and we have 2 degrees. One is an undergraduate degree as a bachelor's degree, and one is a postgraduate master's degree. So in the end, this kind of degree suits somebody who's got an interest in science, who likes to be involved in healthcare in some way, but must have a strong focus on practical techniques. It's really a laboratory-based degree, and the profession you get at the end is laboratory based. Career-wise, you'll find that graduates get jobs in pathology laboratories mostly, but also in things like food or environmental testing laboratories, because you come out with very, very strong skills in lab techniques. You'll find that we've got a quota to our course, and we maintain a quota to make sure we stick with fairly small class sizes. We tend to have a maximum of about 20 per prac class, and because the degree is so heavily focused on lab techniques, we like to have a small numbers in our prac classes to make sure you've got plenty of time to practice getting your skills and good staff to student ratios, and that's really held us in good stead over the last number of years. So if we just move the next slide, Bailey.
Mm-hmm.
So what you find with this degree is those 3 points on the bottom of this slide. It's accredited by the Australian Institute of Medical Scientists, and that's really important because that guarantees the quality of the course. So a course has to go through a rigorous program of accreditation every 4 years to get accredited, and that means you've really got guarantee that our course is giving the right content to suit the industry and the stakeholders in employing our graduates. As a graduate, we tend to make our graduates very, very work ready. So when you leave here and get a job, you're able to be productive from day one. And that again is reinforced by a heavy prac focus within our course. It's also globally recognised. So students who come here from overseas to train, go back to their own country and are highly skilled. It's also transferable to other countries. And we have a number of students who train here and then might work here or work in their home country for a while, but then move somewhere else. And we have a lot of students who go to the UK. So our course is heavily regarded in the UK. One of the things with our course is that some courses around Australia have a major. So you might focus the first 2 years of your degree on a certain specialty, but ours has no majors, and you do all specialties across the 3.5 years of the degree. And that means you're more flexible in terms of employment across different parts of most laboratories, and that's really important to us. Next slide, Bailey. So I'll just now talk a bit more about the specific degrees. So the first one is a bachelor's degree, has a quota of 30 students. Historically, we would take up to 20 of those 30 students would be overseas students. We've had a strong record of overseas students, China, Malaysia, Hong Kong, India, Nepal, some from Africa. So we have a good spread of different nationalities, and they really make our course, I think, better for that rich experience we have with different cultures. The intake is semester 1, but we have now introduced a semester 2 intake. So if you can't get here in semester 1, we can start you in semester 2. Over the 3.5 years, 3 years are on campus, and the last half a year, we place you in a laboratory somewhere in Tasmania to get on-the-job training as part of the final part of your course. In those first 3 years, the first year is basic science, and then you move on from there into specialty learning into things like hematology and microbiology, biochemistry, and increasingly molecular biology. So it's a 3.5 year degree if you come here as an undergraduate. Next slide. The Master of Laboratory Medicine was introduced a number of years ago to sort of fill a gap in the market. So we see that a number of students do very broad-based generic degrees in health science or biomedical science. And then when they finish that degree, they might find it hard to find employment because those degrees are not so clearly vocationally orientated. So if you've got an undergraduate degree in health science or some kind of biomedical science with the right kind of subjects, you can come into our degree and it starts in semester 2, and you leave then with a qualification which is vocationally directed, and you equally employable then in path labs in the same way that the students who do the bachelor's degree. The only small difference here is that the placement that you do in your final semester will normally be on the mainland, but we find the place for you, but you'll have to pay your own accommodation and transport costs to get to wherever we place you. That may be New South Wales, some in Victoria, some as far as the Northern Territory. But in the end, both degrees give you the same qualification and the same employment opportunities. Next slide. So because the master's degree starts in July of each year, we're slightly out of step, but you tend to study some units in conjunction with students who are doing the bachelor's degree. So overall, our quota for the master's degree at the moment is 18 students, and these are filled mostly at the moment by students from overseas. It's also possible in the master's degree to do a different final stream, and rather than doing a placement in a workplace, you might do a small research project, but that course is not accredited. And most students we find are happy to do the one that's accredited because they really want to see an employment opportunity. The final thing I'll say about the accreditation is if students are keen to use the skilled migration visa program, having the course being accredited is a really important step in getting that visa organised. That's the only way it can be recognised as a skilled profession. Okay, I'll be happy to answer any questions at all at the end of the session regarding our intake, what our ATARs are, what our IELTS are, course descriptions. So look forward to questions at the end. Thanks, and I'll pass on to Dr. Renee Ross, who'll talk about the Bachelor of Medical Research. Thanks, Renee.
Thank you, Steve. Can I just check that my microphone is working correctly and you can hear me okay?
Yes.
Very good. So my name is Renee. I'm the course coordinator for medical research. A little bit of background on me. So I'm a physiologist and I have research interests in the area of
Renee, we can't actually hear you.
Okay.
We can hear you, but it's very choppy.
Okay. Is that a little bit better?
No, it's not any better.
Let me just change the microphone.
You might turn your webcam off, Renee, so that way we can just hear your audio. That might work a bit better.
Does that work a little bit better?
Yes. Renee? Have we lost you?
Oh, I'm not sure. Am I there, Bailey?
I can hear you now.
Okay. Can you hear me better?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. Let me start again then. I'm sorry about that. So my name's Renee. I am the course coordinator for the Bachelor of Medical Research, and I'm a physiologist and a type 2 diabetes researcher within the Tasmanian School of Medicine. As well as coordinating the course, I teach across all 3 years of the course, so it's a course I know very well. And it's also a course that I've been involved in teaching and developing for close to 10 years now. It's a course we're very proud of, and it produces really well-rounded and quality graduates. And it's a very distinctive course in the biomedical science area. And one of the reasons for that is that it doesn't just focus on bioscience knowledge or biomedical science knowledge. It has a really strong focus on developing research skills, which are transferable and very, very important in this field. This research skill development and the curriculum around that is facilitated and enhanced by the fact that most of the educators and academics that teach into the course and lead the course are researchers themselves. They know the requirements of the field, they are up to date with the latest knowledge and technologies and innovations, and we can incorporate that very quickly into the curriculum to make sure it remains relevant and contemporary. The course is taught out of the Hobart campus, and most of the classes are based in the Medical Science Precinct, which is a relatively new facility. It has state-of-the-art laboratories, both for teaching and research, that the students will obviously get to experience. We tend to restrict our laboratory and research based work. We restrict the class numbers, so students get a very personalised experience, a lot of interaction and support from the academics, and we build up a very close working relationship with the students, which is really lovely, to the point where many of the graduates stay in contact with us after they graduate, and it's very rewarding to see the way that they develop as researchers and the contributions that they then make to the field. Just on the next slide, please, Bailey. Sorry, I think you might have to click forward 2 or 3 slides. I think they're a little bit out of order.
Right. Thank you.
So what I want to do before I actually get to the course structure is talk to you a little bit about the scope of medical research. So just the next slide again, Bailey. So the scope of medical research, because it's really important that potential students looking at this course understand the breadth of opportunities that medical research presents. One of the classic or immediate ideas of what a medical researcher does is essentially this kind of second panel. And people think about medical research essentially as scientists performing experiments in the lab. And yes, that is much of what medical researchers do. They design and conduct experiments, and they have a very specialised technical knowledge and skill set, and they analyse and interpret data. But the scope of what medical researchers do is so much broader than just this experimental work. So for instance, medical researchers have the knowledge and skill set to look very objectively and critically at information and the scientific literature. And they can look for an evidence base for what we know. But more importantly than that, they can identify gaps in the knowledge, which can then inform areas where we can pursue in order to advance our understanding so that we can develop new and innovative ways to help prevent or treat disease. Another key skill is the ability to synthesize and apply information. And we use this evidence to help inform and advise others. So for instance, this evidence can be used to inform clinical practice guidelines, which can then be used in the diagnosis and treatment strategies that are used on an individual basis, or it can be used more broadly to advise policies and procedures which might be brought into place by health organisations such as the WHO, in the public health sector and in government departments as well, and that then influences the community as a whole. And the global pandemic at the moment is a great illustration of how the advice provided by medical researchers is helping to protect the community and the health of the community as a whole. The other skill set that we have is we're very much involved in education and communication of scientific information. And this communication can be amongst the scientific community itself, or it can be communication and education of the general public, communication through things such as news articles, journals, magazines, social media, podcasts, radio, etc., or more formal communication and development of policy with health organisations and government, as I mentioned. So I think it's really important to understand the broad scope of medical research, and that it's not restricted to the technical laboratory skills that we have. And we keep this very much in mind as we design and develop our course to make sure we meet the requirements of the degree as a whole, and make sure we keep the options and opportunities for career progression and pathways open as much as possible for our students. So can I just go back 1 slide now, please, Bailey? Mm-hmm. So to give you some more specific information about the course, we have 16 units, which are course study, which all students will take. And we can split these 16 units into 2 halves. So half of these units focus on developing content knowledge of the students in the medical science field. We cover a broad range of disciplines, and we give students a really strong foundation in these disciplines, which gives them a broad knowledge and a solid understanding of the fundamental principles that underpin these disciplines. That's advantageous, as then they can go on to specialise in any field that interests them, because they have that broad knowledge base to build on. Complementing those units, we have the other half of the core units focusing on research knowledge and skills. And we actually take the discipline-specific knowledge that they've done in medical sciences and use that as examples and integrate that into our research-specific units. So we cover things such as scientific literacy, research methodology. We look at communication skills as well as technical and practical skills. And we explore the ethical, legal and global considerations as well as contemporary issues in the research sector within these units. Again, giving the students a really well-rounded knowledge base in this area. A really lovely part of the course is that one of the capstone units which students complete in 3rd year allows them to put everything they have learnt into practice. So both knowledge and skills, as they perform their own conduct their own research project from beginning to end. So everything from researching the literature, coming up with aims, designing and conducting the experiments, looking at the data, and then putting that all together in the form of a paper as their final assessment piece. And this unit has been so successful in the past that we've actually now, from next year, have expanded that to be two units, which span the full year, the full third year of their degree. So students are in small groups, 5 to 6 students, who actually essentially take a placement within one of our research groups. And those research groups come from the Tasmanian School of Medicine, the Menzies Research Institute for Medical Research, or the Wicking Dementia Research and Education Centre. So we place students for the duration of their project in these laboratory groups and plan and conduct their experiments in a very supported way. They get to interact with the PhD students, with the postdoctoral researchers, with the lab heads, who are often the academics that taught them. And they get a fully immersive experience as being part of the research group. They attend lab meetings and seminars, as well as conducting their own research project. And that's an experience that you can't replicate in the classroom, and a really lovely experience for students to round off their degree. As well as these areas of study, students have an elective space of 8 units where they can essentially have free rein and choose the 8 units that they wish to complete. So that may be that they wish to do a further specialisation in by doing a medical science major, or they may choose to do something completely different. They could do units in arts or music or journalism or maths, depending on their interests and depending on where they'd like to go in their future careers as well. The next slide, thanks, Bailey. So that just brings me to kind of mention some of the career pathways and opportunities that students from this degree have. Most of our students, probably half the cohort, will go on to an honours year after they finish their bachelor degree. And many of those students will then go on to complete a PhD, either within the College of Health and Medicine, or some may choose to go interstate or abroad. Some of our students will choose to do postgraduate courses, for instance, into medicine or allied health fields. Other students may choose to enter the workforce straight away. And depending on their interests and their what they wish to do, there's a number of sectors that they can go into. So if they enjoy the laboratory-based work, they can take up positions as research assistants or lab technicians in various universities, institutes, or in industry. They can go into the clinical sector, again, working in pathology-type laboratories, or they can be assist with things such as clinical trials or within data management and analysis as well. For those students that like gathering and interpreting information, they might choose to go into community or government sectors and really promote that communication, that education role that I spoke about early, informing policies and procedures that can be implemented on a broader scale. And just the last slide, thanks, Bailey. So hopefully I've managed to highlight, I suppose, the broad nature of the field and tried to illustrate, I suppose, some of the distinctive aspects of the course and the experience that we offer students. More than happy for anyone to ask questions, obviously, now, or contact me if they wish to discuss anything about the degree further. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Renee. And do you mind if I just add a few more points? I'm usually prompted by the video to mention a few points about the medical program, and because I lost that, I think I was quite brief. So I may just take 2 minutes and just add a few tips that would be relevant to an international student applying to medicine. And I'd say, well, a bit of background, I was an international student when I studied medicine. I was in Queensland, coming from Canada. And the biggest concern on the radar of international students then, and that was a number of years ago, but as well as now, is employability and career outcomes in medicine. So unfortunately, as an international student in Australia, when you apply for an internship, which is your first employment following graduation, international students are often left without jobs, and you can appreciate that after a 5-year medical degree, that's quite a risk. So we are really thrilled because we're the only program in Australia that has had a 100% success rate with our medical graduates finding internships in Australia, and that includes our international students. So I find that quite reassuring that I can safely say to our international cohort, you know, so long as you do the hard work from the academic perspective, you can rest easy that, you know, when you graduate, you'll find a job and be able to work as a doctor in Australia. So it's certainly something that I would make well known to international students applying to our program. And then just from a logistics perspective, our class is 120 typically. Our intake is 120, and approximately 20 of those will be international students. And the nice thing about that small class size is that students get to know each other really well. So it's quite, I've been consistently impressed in the years that I've worked at UTAS with how close-knit the medical cohorts are. They very quickly form their own study groups, are very supportive of one another. And because of that small class size, they do get a lot of academic and professional support from the staff. Very quickly, students become on a first name basis with the academic and professional staff. So it's quite a comfortable and close knit and sort of familiar place to study. And I mean, that's why I feel pretty strongly about the medical program. But certainly, I think our career outcomes are something we should be singing about to international students.
Thank you so much, Bailey. We'll jump into the Q&A session straight away because we've got a lot of questions coming through, which is great. And I might just go straight to you, Bailey.
Yeah, I can't see the questions. You'll have to read them to me.
Definitely will. Great question coming through. Can you please tell us why a student should choose UTAS MBBS course instead of going to a competition or another university's MBBS course?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think, like I said, from an international perspective, I suppose if I was a student, I would want to know that after spending 5 years of hard work and a significant amount of money, that I have the confidence in knowing that I'll be employable. And that's something we're quite proud of. So a lot of our students will do an honors year, be involved in research, network quite well within a specialty that they know they're interested in. And that's what is afforded in Tasmania. Being a small state and the only medical program in the state, students really get to network quite well during their placement. So years 3, 4, and 5. So we find that students, for example, who have an interest in surgery have that exposure from early on in the program, and it's not as competitive. So whereby if you're training in Melbourne, you may be one of a few hundred students who are looking to have one-on-one time with a surgeon. That may not happen if you're in quite a large urban center. Whereas Tasmania, we have access to the same surgeons and tertiary services, but fewer students. So students get access to one-on-one support in areas that they're interested in, and it's at a rate that I wouldn't see in other programs.
Lovely, thank you so much. Another lot of MBBS questions covered through. Could you expand more about the entry requirements for the students wanting to study the MBBS program?
Sure. So, and I should have included it in the slide, sorry. So we have the ATAR conversion. So students, of course, are asked to submit their most recent levels of study. So whether it's typically high school leavers, so they're expected to submit their academic transcripts as well as their predicted outcome of the year they're currently in. For IELTS, we would expect students to have no bandwidth less than 7. And what else might you want to, I think from the countries that you're representing, that's probably all they may need to know.
Lovely, thank you for that. We've got a great question here around the current situation for international students and COVID-19 and ability to arrive in Tasmania and study the course. Do we have any assistance set up, or do we have any plans in place for our courses in case students aren't able to arrive?
So certainly for medicine, we have a plan in place. Since April of this year, we've been offering medicine online. I think the nice thing about UTAS is that we've already done a lot of online programs. So fortunately, UTAS has had a bit of an advantage in that case. So medicine, we've been able to offer it online since April, and we're fully expecting that for students who cannot make it to Hobart by February of next year, that they'll begin their medical program online. And it's using small groups, tutorials, and self-directed learning, a mix of those modalities. And then it is expected that once, depending on where the student's coming from, once travel restrictions ease, they'll be expected to make their way to Hobart when it's possible.
Can I just jump in there too?
Mm-hmm.
So with laboratory medicine, because it's heavily focused on laboratory skills, we can't offer the whole course online, but what we have got in place already, and we've done that this year because of COVID, is for students enrolling in 2021, you can do the whole of year one if you're a bachelor's degree. The whole of year one can be done online. If you're in the master's degree starting in semester 2, so starting in June, July, you can do the first semester online. And the intention then would be all of 2021 in either degree can be done online. But when you arrive in 2022, there'll be a small period of intensive practical sessions to catch up on the skills you haven't developed in that online environment, because you still can't replicate everything in that online space. You want to have some handling of stuff in the laboratory. So we've got a catch-up session that's already planned for early in 2022 for those students who study online in 2021.
And we have similar plans in place for the Bachelor of Medical Research. So for 2021, that can be done fully online, and similarly with catch-up sessions for any of the practical skills that they need to catch up on before entering second year.
Thank you so much for that, everyone. And that answers a lot of questions that are coming through and students and the uncertainty and what to do next. So thank you. Stephen, we've got a great question here for you around the research element. Are you able to elaborate on the research aspect of the Masters of Lab Med during the 4th semester?
Okay, so what I'll do is I'll just expand in general about our research program. So whether you're in the bachelor's degree or the master's degree, the staff here are all involved in their own research programs. So we're all combined researchers and teachers. Students doing the bachelor's degree can then go and do honours and then go on from doing honours into a PhD. And a number of our students do PhDs and choose a pathway into research as a full-time career. And we have lots of those students. Probably about 1 in 10 of our students who do the degree do a PhD. Maybe about 3 in 10 do honours, but then head off into jobland. With the master's program, you have 6 months doing a research project. So you'll work one-on-one with a researcher who's got a current program of research already going, and you'll do a small project over 6 months. In that time, you'll do the lab work and you'll write a small thesis. It's probably about a similar level of lab work to doing an honours degree in research. We find that most students who do the Masters are really aiming at the accredited pathway, which takes them then into being employable, but we have probably about 1 in 10 would do the research program. Now, our areas of research at the moment, we have some research on lung disease, we have some on diabetes, we have some on gut health, and we have some on antibiotic resistance and some on respiratory health. But these are all laboratory-based research areas. Does that answer your question, whoever that was?
It does. Thank you so much, Stephen. That's great. I've got a great question around here. How many hours of classroom and lab studies does a medicine student have to do in, say, 1 week of study? Or what is the recommended hours? Yeah.
Oh gosh, that's really hard to comment on because every student is quite different. So typically students would have, let me try to add it up in my head. I haven't actually been asked for an hourly rate. They would typically have 4 to 5 hours of obligations per day. So whether that's small group classes, tutorials, didactic, lecture hall, theater, teaching, or a lab, typically about 4 to 5 hours per day. And we have students who would then go home and spend 4 to 5 hours studying, and we have students who we would call them the procrastinators and would do most of their work a few hours before exams, but I would say 70% of the students fall somewhere in the middle. And the most common form of studying would be small group and independent studying, and I would expect they would spend, yeah, probably 5 to 10 hours a week on independent study.
Perfect. Thank you, Bailey. Steve, another question here from Beth, who would like to expand more on that. The AIMS shows only the professional experience sequence in accreditation for the Masters of Lab Med. What's the difference with the full accreditation? Does it affect skill assessment?
So basically, when the course is AIMS accredited, there is no partial. It's either full accreditation or it's not accredited. So both the Masters in the professional experience sequence and the bachelor's degree are both fully accredited. So once you're a graduate of those courses, you are recognised by the Australian Institute of Medical Scientists as a professional medical scientist, and that meets the criteria for the skilled migration visa.
Thank you very much, Steve. I'm just going through a lot of these questions, a lot quite specific to students' cases. Sorry, I'm just going through to get everyone. Here we go. Does the Bachelor of Laboratory program only study on human biology, or does it also cover other forms of biology knowledge as well?
Look, our degrees are both focused heavily on human biology and human medicine. Having said that, we do have some of our students get placed in an animal health laboratory because our techniques transfer across. Really, whether you're looking at blood from an animal or blood from a human, you do the same techniques. You may have different levels of interpretation and different things to look for, but the skills are transferable. And in fact, if I look now at the staff that are employed at the current animal health laboratory in Launceston, they are all trained in this degree. I mean, there is no, as far as I'm aware, there is no degree that trains you specifically for laboratory investigation of animal health. So most times there'd be crossovers from those who've trained in human health first.
Probably leads into another great question that is directed at all three of our panelists. The percentage or the lecturers and the teachers of the particular courses, how many would you say are currently practicing doctors or practicing in their field of study? Probably start with you, Bailey.
So for medicine, it's 100%. So that's actually one of the criteria for being an academic staff at the university, and that's unique to UTAS. It's something we're certainly quite proud of. So all of our lecturers, as well as professors and associate professors, have a clinical role as well as an academic role. And it lends itself to having instructors who are up to date with clinical guidelines.
I would say the same in the Bachelor of Medical Research. 100% of the academics involved in teaching have a PhD and are actively involved in research.
So with laboratory medicine, it's a little bit difficult to explain, but so about 80% of the staff here have a background of working in pathology laboratories as medical scientists, but we've all made the move from industry into academia. But we've all got, I mean, I've had 20 years experience working in a lab before I came here to be an academic. So our background really lends well to knowing what it is required in pathology and in what industry wants. As part of accreditation, we also need to maintain currency in current practice in industry. So even though we're not currently working in industry, we have really, really close links. So we all have close links with all the local laboratories. And when we have our students placed in these labs for part of their placement for the work integrated learning, then we also go back to those laboratories and maintain our currency by seeing what the new developments are and what new instrumentation and new techniques are being used in pathology, and we update our course accordingly. As part of our accreditation, we need to demonstrate that we are maintaining currency and that our course is relevant to things that are working today, not just what was happening when we were working 10 years ago.
Thank you, Stephen. Sorry, I'm just going through, making sure we've got some great questions here. Still coming through, which is great. Bailey, I was wondering if you could expand a little bit more around the ISAT requirements of students for the MBBS program.
Sure. So the ISAT is a 3-hour computer-based standardized exam specific to Australia, and it was designed to assess an applicant's critical reasoning and analysis and problem-solving skills. And so it's slightly different than a number of other academic tests, which have more of a content focus. So aside from a student or an applicant familiarizing themselves with the format of the test, there's actually no study required, I should say, for the ISAT. So yeah, so it gives us an idea more of how somebody thinks and how they can critically analyze, because we found that purely academic tests aren't necessarily a great predictor of how well somebody does in medical school. We want problem solvers, people who can think outside the box and solve riddles, for lack of better words. So that's where the ISAT comes in. It's also worth mentioning that as of about a week ago, we now accept the MCAT, which is a North American test, and that change has been in response to we're seeing a lot more North American applicants to our program, or a lot more students from around the world who were considering applying to North American programs, and now because of COVID have perhaps changed their mind. So we're accepting the MCAT in addition to the ISAT.
Thank you, Bailey. Here's a great question around the MBBS. When do students begin hospital placements, or when do they start their hospital placements?
So clinical placements, that could be a long answer. I'll make it brief. Year 1, we actually have students exposed to patients through what's called our standardized patient exposure. Standardized patients are members of the community who receive a bit of training in medical education, and students have a weekly class with a standardized patient going through physical examination skills and consultation skills. It's a really nice way for students to practice these very important skills prior to being in hospital. So they get patient exposure actually from year 1, week 1, but formal terms don't start until year 3. They have year 3 is more of an observership type placement in general practice, where they're one-on-one with a specialist. They become slightly more independent as they progress. So year 4 and 5 are entirely clinical. They'll be basically almost full-time in hospital. Ranging terms can be as short as 2 weeks for quite a subspecialized placement, to up to 8 to 10 weeks for something like general medicine and general surgery.
Thank you, Bailey. For the Bachelor of Laboratory Medicine program, the workplace, can it be done in another country other than Australia?
Yes, it can. We tend not to organise those placements, but if a student has contacts in laboratories in their own country, we can facilitate an arrangement between the university and that laboratory. We've had this a few times. We've had some students do their placement in Singapore, but we strongly encourage students, if they want to do their placement in their own country or a different country of their own choice, they would need to make the contacts, because we tend to limit our own network of laboratories to Tasmania and to broader Australia, but we certainly do support the placements being overseas, provided the laboratory's got a certain level of accreditation. So there are standards internationally that recognise the quality of a laboratory. It can't just be a small backyard operation. It's got to be, you know, a significantly sized laboratory to meet the criteria for AIMS for accreditation.
Thank you, Stephen. Here's one that's coming through that's getting asked quite a bit, and it'll be directed to all three of our panelists today, is, are there any scholarships available for the courses? We'll start with you again, Bailey.
Sure. Yes. So I've recently received an email about the scholarships that have been approved for this year. So we have, I believe it's 5 Dean scholarships, which will be 15% off total fees over the 5 years, and that's entirely based on academics. So every student is eligible and automatically considered when they apply, assuming they apply before January. So they're not, students who do a late application will not be included, but all of the students are automatically eligible and assessed for our academic scholarships.
For the BMed Res, yes, there are various discipline-specific scholarships that are available. And also from next year, we'll become part of the Catalyst program, which is for high achieving students, which essentially is a type, I suppose, of scholarship that is also offered alongside the degree. So those are for students with quite high ATARs of over 90. They become part of this additional Catalyst program, which also has some scholarship money attached to it.
So we do offer some scholarships. These are mainly scholarships that assist with travel to get to Australia. So it's called a Tasmanian International Scholarship. So they're really, I mean, I was talking to my students just last week, asking them about why they had chosen here versus other universities. And I was hoping to get an answer that was saying things like, you know, we like your quality and we like your staff, etc. But a lot of them said, we like you because you offer us a scholarship to help us get here. So the reality is, I mean, students are shopping around for a whole lot of things other than just single criteria that we might think they are. They're quite savvy.
Thank you, everyone. One question around the MBBS that's come through is around the assessment criteria and the different weighting. So is the, sorry, let me just, is the academic requirement and the ISAT requirement on par or the same level, or will more percentage be given to someone that's got more of an academic achievement than the ISAT score, or vice versa?
That's a really good question. I mean, every student is actually, they're assessed case by case. So if they meet the ISAT criteria, which is achieving 50th centile or higher, and they have an ATAR, typically our class has an ATAR of 95 and higher, we will accept students who are 92.5 with an ATAR if they've performed really well on the ISAT. For example. So if they meet those criteria, then it actually comes down to case by case. There's no interview process, so it's based on the academic portfolio that they submit.
Lovely, thanks, Bailey. And I think there's one more question here that I had just for you. Let me see if I can find it. Is the curriculum for the MBBS program discipline-based or problem-based, like scenario-based?
Yeah, so we use what's called case-based learning. So it's the same as problem-based learning. And you'll find, I think, medical schools worldwide are leaning towards case-based, problem-based learning. It's certainly, there's more evidence for it as far as acquisition and retention of knowledge. So yes, we use a case-based learning curriculum.
Thank you, everyone on the panel. There's a few questions that are coming in that are just very specific to particular cases that we'll definitely get in touch with the people asking them at the end of this presentation. Definitely give you a call and talk you through your particular case. I'll just keep it open for a little bit longer to see if we've got any more questions coming through. And then, yeah, I'll just keep asking them as
I
they
saw
come.
a question there on the chat before about quotas that I'm not sure if it's been answered properly yet.
Yeah, definitely, Stephen, if you'd like to jump in around the quota.
So we have a quota for the bachelor's degree of 30, and of those 30, 20 can be international. And our quota for the master's degree is 18, and of those 14 would be international. In the end, what we try and do is we often have a couple of hundred applications, but we'll rank those according to quality and set our offers and work our way through the applicants that way.
Thank you. I think there's one question here around one student's just curious about the difference between the Doctor of Medicine and MBBS. So Bailey, I wonder if you could answer that one for us.
Yeah, of course. We do actually get asked that a lot, particularly from students who are considering applying to North American programs. As far as career outcomes go, they're exactly the same. The difference being that MD programs require completion of an undergraduate degree prior to applying, whereas an MBBS program, while it's longer, it's 5 or 6 years. We're a 5-year program, and MD is 4. So while the MBBS is 1 year longer, you're not required to complete an undergraduate degree prior. So overall medical education journey is shorter with an MBBS. As far as career outcomes, there's a negligible difference. Once you're a doctor, nobody ever asks whether you did an MD program or an MBBS. I've never been asked.
I think that's pretty much majority of questions answered. Like again, I said there's a lot of specific ones to specific cases that we'll get in touch with the person asking that question a bit one-on-one, a more personal setting. But keep bringing the questions through. We'll probably leave it open for about a couple more minutes and then we'll go. But yeah, if anyone's got any more questions, please continue to put them through. Let's have a look. A question here around the MBBS. I'm not sure if I asked it yet, but Bailey, around the format of the study from year 1 to 3 and the real ongoing cases for students. So do they work with ongoing particular real life aspects or real life cases throughout their degree?
So it's a mix of both. So as far as our case-based learning, that's week to week, but also delivered through the semester. So we have 4 domains that every semester will touch on, and that means it's not just entirely about clinical sciences and academia, but there are also health and society domains and clinical competency. We want students to be quite well-rounded, so every semester does include those domains. The case-based learning, that case will last 1 week, occasionally 2 weeks. Well, you'll learn about that particular pathology, and then the theme continues through the entire semester. The delivery is a mix of small group, didactic lecture hall theater, and independent study.
Lovely. Thank you, Bailey. We'll just leave it 2 more minutes. got a question here around subjects and electives, but no specific course that they're asking about. So maybe we open that up to all three of the panelists around the course, the unit selection, and maybe just a brief introduction of the first semester unit selection from each of the courses. Maybe starting with you, Stephen.
So one of the things about our course, which I mean some students find really useful, is there are no choices. So you stay in the same cohort from start to finish, and that means you get a good connection with the students that you're studying with. It also takes the pressure off you trying to choose the right pathways. So a course is set that way because for accreditation requirements, you've got to make sure we fill the right knowledge base in the first year and a half and the right specialties as you go through in the last part of the degree. So in general, year one would be things like you'd be studying anatomy, physiology, bit of chemistry, some cell biology, and then in year two at the start, you do things like immunology, some more biochemistry. And once you get past the first year and a half, the next 2 years are all really aimed directly at specialist laboratory subjects. So hematology, microbiology, clinical biochemistry, and molecular biology. And these are all aimed at a diagnostic approach and how you would use those specialties in a laboratory situation.
For the Bachelor of Medical Research, so we have our first year, which is obviously the foundational year. We have 2 units that look at human anatomy and physiology. So that starts with cell biology and works all the way up to working through all the anatomy and physiology of each of the body systems. We have 2 units that look at research methodology and scientific communication. And 2 units, one which is very practical, looking at laboratory skills, and one which is based on an introduction to pathological processes. And then there's 2 elective units where students can choose what they'd like to do. And then into second year, again, we have a similar type of structure where we have 2 units that are research focused, 4 units which are based on biomedical science disciplines, so 1 in physiology, 1 in pathology, 1 in biochemistry, and 1 in genetics and molecular biology. And again, 2 units of elective of choice. And then into the third year, that's where we have the kind of capstone unit, which is a year-long research project, which is 2 units. We have 2 units which are very practical based and looking at technical skills in research from, again, biomolecular all the way up to a systems-based processes. And then we have 4 units in the elective space where students can choose to do further specializations. So we have units in neuroscience, in genetics, in biochemistry, where they can do that advanced medical sciences, depending on their area of interest.
Thanks. For the MBBS program, the first 3 years are exactly the same for every student, so there's no variability. That changes years 4 through 5, so every student needs to complete the same number of mandatory terms: general surgery, pediatrics, psychiatry, general medicine, etc. And then we have what's called selective, so students have 4 terms that they'll choose from a list, so they're slightly more focused areas, and they'll do selectives, and then further to that they'll do 1 elective term, so that can be up to 12 weeks in any specialty, in any location of their choosing. And this is where students, it's really exciting to see what they choose. That's between their 4th and 5th year. And last year, some students spent 8 weeks doing rural healthcare in the Simien Mountains in Ethiopia. And it's pretty neat actually to see these students get to do something quite unique to what their interests are. But the years 1 through 3 are the exact same for every student.
Lovely, thank you so much. We might leave it there. There's not that many more questions that come through that aren't already been answered. So again, I'd like to say thank you so much to our panelists, Dr. Bailey Dunn, Dr. Renee Ross, and Dr. Stephen Tristane. Thank you again for your time and the information that you've shared with our cohort. Any question that wasn't answered during the Q&A session, we'll get in touch with you after this session through a personal call. We'll answer any questions that you do have on the programs. And if anything further is required, we can definitely pass you on your details on to the presenters to answer any of those questions. So thank you again, everyone, for taking part, answering the questions, asking the questions and so forth. Lovely, I think that's it. So thank you so much.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.